You know, I see a lot of podcasters copying some of the biggest shows in the world, and it absolutely drives me crazy. Why? Because we are losing the true purpose of what making long-form content and making podcasting is really all about. Creating a authentic relationship and bond with the people that are watching. Doing exactly what Steven Bartlett does or Joe Rogan does or having a show just like theirs is really not going to put you in a position to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, let alone have people feel as though that they get a chance to know who you are. So here are my 5 steps to creating powerful long-form content that you could use right now to not only encapsulate your authenticity, but to entertain the people that are going to be watching you online or listening to you in their earbuds. Welcome to Built to Tell. I am Mike Liguori. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have liked some of the other videos or other episodes that you have previously watched on this channel, or you've listened to on Apple and Spotify, go ahead and give me a follow. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that subscribe and click on that notification bell so you get notified of the next videos and episodes that come out on the channel. So we're going to get into why there are so many damn copycats. And it's no secret. I mean, when you look at people like Joe Rogan, you look at people like Steven Bartlett, you look at people like Theo Vaughn, everybody is trying to find the formula to success when it comes to podcasting. Everybody's trying to find the formula to success when it comes to YouTube, right? Everybody, I'm sure you've seen this as well. There are trailers that mimic Diary of a CEO, or there are intros that mimic how Theo Vaughn does his podcast. And you've seen the dynamic text and the quick jump cuts. We've all seen it. It's one of those things that I have found in the podcasting world to be very disturbing because we are losing the true purpose of what making long-form content and making podcasting is really all about, which is us in an intimate setting, creating a authentic relationship and bond with the people that are watching, like you on the other side of this camera. It really drives me nuts because I think people, again, they're putting metrics, vanity metrics specifically, they're putting the aesthetics of what it looks like for them to be able to have a show in front of the true intent and purpose of having this show. And so again, it's a really big problem. The thing is that if you're trying to copy other people in terms of starting your podcast, or you're in a season right now where your podcast, you've probably done maybe 10, 20, 30 episodes, and you're looking for some sort of inspiration or something's not working for you, generally the first thing that we do as human beings is we go and try to find somebody else that we can copycat and we can mimic. Because why? Well, they have millions of subscribers. They have millions of viewers. And why not copycat that pathway to success? But again, in the spirit of authenticity, in the spirit of this channel, you have your own unique story to tell and you have your own style. That's not to say that you can't learn from the greats or be influenced by them. But what it really comes down to is that when you're trying to find your own path of success and your own key to greatness, it is very, very important that you pick exactly what you feel as though you can integrate into your own podcast and your own storytelling formula and be able to convey that in your own way. Doing exactly what Steven Bartlett does or Joe Rogan does or having a show just like theirs is really not going to put you in a position to differentiate yourself in the marketplace, let alone have people feel as though that they get a chance to know who you are because you're so caught up in trying to be successful instead of trying to be you. So let's move on to the next subject. So the content world is completely saturated. I want to read another study from you that I found when I was creating this episode this morning, that according to a study from Riverside.fm in 2023, 82% of podcast listeners say they build more trust with long-form creators compared to influencers on short-form platforms. And so if you really want to build something lasting, you just need more than a good mic and a hot take. You got to have some depth. You got to have a story that makes people want to lean into you and really be able to say, this person gets me. And so if you want to stand out from the crowd, the most important thing is you have to make your content shareable. Now, what do I mean by that? You might be thinking right off the bat, oh, well, that's exactly what all these platforms want. They want me to make content that shares. They want me to make content that somebody's going to go like, oh my God, I got to tell my buddies about this. Yes, to an extent, but shareable content can also be done in a very resourceful way. Meaning you could say something in your podcast that is unique to you, that is your own take on a subject matter, or it could be a powerful question that you ask somebody that's in an interview with you. And again, the goal here is if you really want to stand out from the crowd and you don't want to be a copycat, and especially because we have been talking about copycats for the first part of this episode, chances are right now that in order for you to really stand out, you have to have an honest, brutal take on something. That doesn't mean it has to be deceitful or does it have to be hurtful. Brutal brutal in the sense of it has to be direct and open, and knowing that somebody's probably going to retaliate and push back on you. That's just the way the world is right now. Is that okay? Oh, I wouldn't prefer it to go that way. But the reality is that's just how people are responding to content now, is that they're looking for hot takes. They're looking for fresh perspectives. They're looking for entertainment more than they are education. But if you're just copying, again, what everybody else is doing, your hot takes are actually not your hot takes. Your hot takes belong to Steven Bartlett, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, any other major podcaster. Alex Cooper's another one. You have to get really, really clear on what your perspective is in order for you to separate yourself from the pack. Copying other people is not going to get you to where you want to go. Influence will. Copying them will not get you success. And remember, the great content creators know that the mindset that they have going into an episode or an interview is their own unique perspective. They sit there and they tell themselves, I have something to share with the world. And I also know what my audience needs from me. So I have to be able to convey that. Okay, so now we're going to go into the framework. So here are my 5 steps to creating powerful long-form content that you could use right now to not only encapsulate your authenticity, to communicate your hot takes, but to entertain the people that are going to be watching you online or listening to you in their earbuds. So let's get into it. So the first one you want to start off with is the meaning. You got to ask yourself, why am I making this piece of content? And if you remember the last video that I did where I talked about intent, meaning is the exact same thing. I got to write this down. I got to figure out what this is. I got to really have a clear-cut understanding of the meaning of this story, this point of view, or this hot take that I'm about to share with you right now. This is really helpful for podcasters specifically, because if you watch somebody like Steven Bartlett, what he does an amazing job of, he has a lot of intent behind every single one of his questions. He knows exactly what questions he wants to ask. He knows exactly the flow of those questions, and he knows how to listen, which is going to be something that we're going to talk about in future episodes, is talking about how to conduct really powerful interviews. But for the sake of this conversation that we're having today, it's really important that you understand the meaning. Why am I telling this story? Who is this story for? How do I get it across to them? What is it going to take for me to tell it in a very powerful and meaningful way for that person? This is where you go do your research. This is where you come in and start looking at your notes. This is where you prepare for the recording process. You don't just jump into something and thinking, I can just grip it and rip it, and someone's going to be able to completely understand what I'm doing. Now, you may be a seasoned speaker. You may have done a podcast for an incredibly long time. Kudos to you. However, for most people, it is very, very important that you practice and rehearse until you get your workflow down to be able to convey your truth, your hot take, your brutal perspective, your direct, open, honest, compassionate take on whatever subject matter your podcast is on or content is on. You have to have a framework first before you can start saying whatever you want to say, and in a manner that people are going to understand and want to have an engaging, open conversation with you around. So step 1 is start with the meaning, and a simple little exercise. Again, pull out a piece of paper, sit down and ask yourself, let's say you're doing a guest interview. For this interview, what is the meaning of our conversation that we are going to have? So let me give you an example. I have a friend who works as a functional medicine doctor, and the conversation that I would like to have with him is not just going to be around functional medicine. That's a very broad topic. It could go multitude of ways. I would rather focus in on one simple thing that we can get really, really deep on, and we can extract the facts and we can have a back and forth conversation around. 1, that's my intent. That's the meaning of the story. And 2, it's also finding out what is going to be meaningful for the audience. So what do they want to hear? Let's say they want to hear more about cancer prevention. Well, maybe I bring my friend on, and the long form conversation that we're going to have is simply going to be around cancer prevention. Like, why do people have cancer? How do people get cancer? What can people do to prevent cancer or get rid of cancer? That establishes the meaning there. So I really encourage you, whether it's a solo podcast episode like this or it's a conversation, go ahead and write down the meaning of what you want to talk about today and get really, really clear on any sort of guest conversations you have or solo conversations that you have. Okay, number 2, anchor the story in emotion. Neuroscientists love talking about how powerful stories are for us because our brain just loves connecting to the stories that we share with each other. And so it's really important that once you establish that meaning, anchoring it in emotion, meaning don't just tell the story as the story happened. Tell the story from your own personal experience, which means share your feelings, share your emotions, share your perspectives, share the thoughts that were going through your head. These are all ways to really anchor in that story, because people on the other side of that camera are going to look at you and go, wow, that's a really great story. I totally relate to it. Or they're not going to like your story at all. And it's mostly because you were absent of emotion. And again, people want to anchor in a story because of the emotion, because we gravitate towards that. It's science-based, it's biological-based. So when you go ahead and you anchor in any sort of content, whether again, it's a solo podcast or it is a podcast interview or conversation that you are having on your show or on somebody else's show, every story that you tell, you got to find the anchor point with your emotion. Best way to do that, get in front of a mirror and practice the stories that you want to tell. Or you can even tell your partner, your spouse, or a friend to listen to your story and point out areas and opportunities that you can to improve with a little bit more emotion and a little bit more energy, a little bit more zest in the story. It's very important that you anchor that in terms of emotion. Okay, so the third piece here, and I know a lot of people have talked about this, whether to include this or not. Vulnerability can be thrown around as a buzzword, but I encourage you to find some areas in which vulnerability needs to be on full display. Now, I did not say overshare. It's very, very important. You do not overshare when you tell a story. Rather, letting people in to your experience of the said event, the said story, the said video, the said conversation is going to be really key and really powerful to be able to differentiate yourself in the marketplace and give yourself the opportunity to create really powerful content. Here's why. You can have the meaning, you can have the story down pat, you can anchor it in with emotion. If there's no sense of opening yourself up with a little bit of vulnerability, what were you scared of? What were you afraid of? What did you think was going to go wrong? You're going to lose people, because people want to know and connect with you again to that understanding about the emotional aspect of your experience within that story. This is something that you can rehearse. This is something that you can practice, being able to display when vulnerability is really appropriate, when you're telling the story, at times when it's not appropriate. The most important thing here is give people a little bit of you to them in that conversation or in that episode or in that video that you're doing. It's so important that you do that, because it will really just deepen your connection with them and really leads to great, powerful content online. Okay, number 4 is teaching through the personal. It drives me bonkers when people talk in the general and they don't speak from their own personal experience. And I always love people that have had amazing conversations or speak online from personal experience. I always find the stories specifically with guys like David Meltzer, who lost $100 million, and he uses that as one of his anchor points in talking about what it was like for him to lose all of that money to discover the power of gratitude. It makes me want to listen to someone like that more, because they've been to the bottom of the barrel and they've risen from it. And they know from experience what it's like to lose everything or to not have the things that we in our society really value and cherish. And in his story specifically, it's a fantastic story. He talks about losing it all and practicing gratitude out of the darkness of that event. So it's really important that you use stories and you use frameworks that are deeply rooted in your personal experience. Do not try to copycat somebody else's story to pawn off as your own and thinking that someone's going to be able to resonate with you and want to buy from you just like they would from somebody else. It's just not going to work. People are very aware of when somebody is a snake oil salesman or when somebody is not telling the truth. And it's very important for you to tell the stories that you've gone through. Now, I get this question often. What happens if I don't have those stories or I don't have those experiences, even though I want to tell that story? What happens if I don't have that? This is a great question. Then it's okay for you to tell stories from other people's experiences, particularly historical figures, which I find to be the most powerful example of stories. And being able to go to that place and say, hey, well, a great example of this was Benjamin Franklin when he discovered electricity. Benjamin Franklin when he created the post office. Like, those are okay because those are actually great examples of people who have gone through or have had some sort of experience that you can relate to your audience. But I do encourage encourage you to really lead personally with your own experiences and really anchor your framework, anchor your content, anchor your stories, all within your own personal experience. The last thing that you want to do is you want to make sure there's a clear-cut invitation for that person to come join you in whatever offer or whatever community that you have, or simply just for them to listen to the next episode. And the reason why you want to do that is because people want to feel included. They want to feel like they are a part of a community in a group. I believe truly that nobody really wants to be alone and nobody wants to not have a group of people that they don't belong to. I think everybody wants a sense of community and belonging, and they want a group of friends that they can have in this lifetime. If you give these people an opportunity to come join you, whether it's paid, whether it's free, whatever the case may be, you're going to get more people who are excited, more people engaged in your content, more people who want to listen to your podcast because they feel like they have a place to continue the discussion that you just had, whether it's in a format like this, or it is in a group conversation, or it's in a podcast interview that you're having as well. So always give a clear-cut invitation. And again, I found the most effective one is simply just giving them a free resource, suggesting a book. Maybe it's your book or maybe it's somebody else's book. Or it's simply like, hey, I'm going to have a virtual event and I would love for you to be a part of it because I'm going to be teaching X, Y, and Z that I think is really going to help you reach the next level. Anyway, that's all I have for today. So use that 5-step framework. If you feel like your content's dragging just a little bit, if you feel like it's really not there where you want it to be, if you feel like you're just copying other people, like the big podcast names in the world, this is a framework that can really get you away from the rest of the pack and away from these people that are just trying to mimic what everybody else is doing and really establish your own brand, your own community through this framework. So I hope you found this helpful. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Built to Tell. Again, if you like what you heard and you like what you saw, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and click on that notification bell. I truly appreciate it. This is Mike Liguori, and I will see you next week. Peace.